Title 1: Simple Systems. This is a photograph of the inside of my mind. I know this because when I was 12 or 13, I experienced a series of traumatic brain injuries. One outcome of this is that I got to spend time with a neuropsychologist who helped me understand not only how my brain wasn't functioning in the way I was used to, but the ins and outs of how I process information in general. Some of the results of these brain injuries were that my motor skills, short-term memory, and word recall were severely impaired. A lot of the tools that were usually at my disposal that I had taken for granted were no longer available to me. With the help of this neuropsychologist, I was able to create compensatory skills to work around these perceived deficits. Once I got my normative abilities back, I put a lot of emphasis on my own value based on my ability to produce. In 2012, there was another significant shift in my life when I temporarily lost my ability to use my hands due to what doctors called overuse, which I guess is the medical term for what happens when you are etching a zinc plate for 9 to 13 hours a day. During this time, I listened to an NPR story with a person who became quadriplegic when they were in their 30s or 40s. This person fell into a suicidal depression because they couldn't comprehend the value of their own life without the use of their limbs. But after a few years, there was a significant shift in their own self-worth. This got me thinking a lot about how I perceived my own value. What was my worth outside of being a machine of production? All of a sudden, I became a lot less interested in making things, and instead became much more interested in making spaces where there could be collaboration, mutual growth, questioning, and sharing. Title 2: A plus B equals X. In 2009, I was sitting in a diner somewhere around Baltimore with my friend Nick Podgorski. I asked Nick if he liked this one band that I was really into. It was a jazz punk band. They had jazzy parts, they had punk parts, and I thought they were really virtuosic. To my surprise, Nick didn't like this band. He told me that he wasn't impressed when people took elements A and B and added them together to get A next to B. Instead, he was way more interested when A plus B equals X. This now reminds me of a George Balanchine quote that a friend recently relayed to me that goes something like, "There's no new steps, only new combinations." This made so much sense to me, thinking about A and B as static elements combining to make the variable X. But what if A and B aren't static elements? What if they are also variables? If A and B are autonomous entities, then X all of a sudden becomes exponentially more unpredictable. Title 3: Surfing the Wave of Unknowing. A plus B equals X is a great descriptor of a container for indeterminacy. When I think of designing systems, I'm often also thinking of designing containers. Not too long ago, Lynn Hickson and Matthew Goulash introduced me to the idea of giving your 90% as opposed to giving 110%. Systems that are designed too well don't leave any room. Something I don't talk about often in my grad school experience is that I'm a musician. I began playing in clubs when I was about 13, and I've been playing in bands and touring ever since. The past few years, I've become a lot less interested in playing set songs, and instead have been focusing on designing systems for improvisation. Most recently, my longest running band, Muscle Brain, has been eschewing those set songs in favor of song systems. These systems utilize rules and constraints to yield wildly different results each time. Being a part of these open systems allows me to engage both as an active participant and conscious observer rather than a reproducer. This is me on top of a wall that I constructed in collaboration with third grade students in Denver, Colorado. I work as an educator, but more specifically, I work as a teaching artist, designing and integrating arts curriculum into public school classrooms. In one of my classrooms, we've been playing this game where we look at really simplistic shapes and write as many guesses as we can of what we think it could be. We take turns sharing our answers and we laugh and appreciate all the different interpretations people have come up with. Recently, students have been creating their own images for this game. One of my students made this beautiful rendering of this dog that is crying. I told the student that I was willing to use their image for the game, but I had doubts about its effectiveness in terms of a wide range of interpretation, not because it wasn't a good image, but because it was too good. When we shared this image for the game, people came up with only one or two interpretations because its intention was so apparent. I let the student know how proud I was of them for their skill and the beauty of their image, but we also had a conversation about why that image didn't work for this game. I didn't put it in these terms, but that student had given us 110% and hadn't left any room for us. In 2019, I designed a performance called 22 Trillion. In this piece, I posed to the audience that I needed their help to create this fictitious video documentation of a performance that doesn't happen so that I could use it in the future to lie to curators in order to get money to remount this performance, in reality mounting it for the first time. Behind the scenes, I had a lot of other intentions, so many so that it would take an entire other project to really lay it out for both you and for me. But I can say for sure that I did succeed in all of my intentions with this piece. It's just that when it was all said and done, I wasn't happy with my intentions. And I kind of consider this piece to be a failure. Because even though I created this really convoluted maze that I could be self-impressed about, it really didn't invite anyone else in on the joke with me. So in the end, it really was a lonely endeavor. At the same time that I was trying out 22 Trillion, I was implementing another system that I had designed. In a past life, I ran a publishing company called Adult Punk. When I moved back to Chicago in 2018, I dissolved this company. I always really enjoyed making these books and working with different artists, but something I enjoyed as much or maybe even more was that the books gave me an opportunity and an excuse to go to book fairs all around the country and sit behind a table talking with people. After I ended Adult Punk, I began thinking of ways that I could use publishing to create spaces to connect with people. Not long before this, I had attended Mark Fisher's meal-based artist residency, which takes place over the course of lunch at Jongbu Market in Chicago. This was the first time I had heard of an artist residency taking place over such a short period of time. Somewhere along the line, I bought this architectural blueprinting machine from an estate sale. I really didn't know much about this machine, aside from the one YouTube video that shows someone running a comparable machine. But this felt like a great opportunity because without any technical knowledge, I didn't really focus on technical proficiency and instead could really use this as a tool for experimentation. There's often a lot more opportunities in the unintended uses of something than the intended uses. In January 2019, I founded Blueprint Residency, which is a day-long artist residency that takes place in my home. In advance, people propose uses for this blueprinting machine, and then they come over to my house, spend an entire day, and I cook them 3 full meals as they make an edition of 18 by 24-inch prints on that machine. I designed this system with very few but very specific constraints, which took care of time, the dimensions of the prints, food, so that people could really focus on their process. Spending 9 to 16 hours with potentially a stranger can seem like a long time, but when it comes to making a final piece, it's actually pretty scant. Within that time constraint, there really isn't much room for preciousness, so experimentation comes to the forefront. Another element that compounds this is that I really don't know much about this machine, so we're forced to explore together. Although the physical manifestation of the prints and the artwork are always wildly different, a consistent outcome of this system is vulnerability. How often do you spend an entire day with a relative stranger? Sharing food they've cooked for you, exchanging your music tastes, talking. There's something special about that duration with someone. In the first 12 months of the residency, I hosted artists from Detroit, DC, Memphis, Minneapolis, and Chicago. Here's some clips just to share what this residency can look like. Great. Good morning.
Good morning.
I feel like I don't usually.
You see that, man?
It's good stuff.
Go Suns.
Oh.
It's like driving a car.
The system might seem simple on the surface, but it hinges upon the idea that the two main variables going into it are extraordinarily complex. In this instance, the two main variables are two people bringing their worlds of experience together, collaborating, communing, sharing food and music and conversation, and therefore X is exponentially expansive and indeterminate. This is a tattoo I gave myself after a work meeting right at the beginning of quarantine. I think of it as a rough reminder to surf the wave. I think it goes without saying, but I'll say it anyway. In March 2020, Blueprint Residency went on indefinite hiatus. It felt like at this time my imagination went on hiatus as well. To keep myself busy, I dove into my archives and began tracing drawings that I had done over the past 10 years. At this point, I didn't feel like I had the capacity to make something new, but I could remix my past selves. About a month before lockdown, I had begun working on this project where I was manipulating records that I had pressed 10 years before. In order to do this, I created a contraption that shredded books that I had previously published onto this record that I had previously published, both of which I was really tired of lugging around the country. This process created a dynamic relationship between record cartridge and record that I had never experienced before. Just to be clear, when I'm talking about a record cartridge, I'm talking about that whole little headpiece on a record player, which also contains the record needle, which goes into the grooves of the record. As the paper shredded and would settle in different ways, the needle would fall into varying range of grooves as it forged towards the center. I was familiar with locked grooves, but not in such a varying capacity. I recorded the audio of this process and pressed two separate one-off records, one of the sound from the needle and one recording the surface sound with a microphone. I also transcribed all of the lyrics from this process, and it's striking me now that I should probably make a new scroll that shreds at the pace that the record is playing, so that I can shred that onto a new record to record it to press another one-off record. Maybe following this convoluted logic, it makes sense that being stuck at home, I started really playing around with records. Here's a little look into what that kind of iteration looked like. I started with this trick that I learned in middle school from a PBS documentary where you can put a sticker on there and it'll knock the needle. So tone arms are cool, but what if you remove them? Or add things to the surface of the record like melted crayon. In some instances, it's more textural and topographic. Here I was wondering if I could drip a record onto another record like a crayon. But it turns out it really doesn't drip, it just smells really bad. This is using multiple cartridges now without a tone arm, but also with wood stain that's on there that never really settles, so it as it partially dries, it moves the needles in different interesting ways. I really have no clue what's happening with this one. It looks just like a pile of wires and somehow the cartridges are there. This is one of the first times I started using 3 cartridges, but having the one on the tone arm going towards the center while the other ones were creating locked grooves. And here you can see that the loose cartridges can do a lot of other things that the tone arm can't do. There I'm using the sticker trick again, but this is one of the first times I started thinking about using multiple manipulated record players. And this is just a DJ thing of using doubles of the same record, but I thought it would be fun to try. And here I start running things through my mixer so I could put effects on them, but I really am not interested in the technical proficiency of being a DJ. It's much more about still being an observer and using these as tools of experimentation. If we think of the 2 record players as variables A and B, then they're creating this exponential X. But if we take that X and turn it into a new A and consider me as a separate variable B, then we get infinitely more indeterminate results. I had really been missing sharing surprise and the unknown with collaborators. And even though these collaborators were inventions of systems that I had designed, I started to feel my sense of imagination coming back. We only have about 2 minutes left, and I want to use this time to play a game with you. I'm going to show a very simple image, and you have 1 minute to write in the chat or to think or speak the different interpretations that you think this image could be. If you decide to type in the chat, after the minute is up, click enter. That way we can all see our different interpretations of this image, and we can spend some time maybe laughing or just appreciating each other's different responses to this very simple system. All right, here it goes.